Hey guys, I'm Dov, and today I'm here to talk to you about Lore of Fire. We're here with the Empire, who is the premier fire faction in the game at the moment. Let's go ahead and talk about things very quickly because my opponent has gone all in on a mass vanguard here, and he's brought a very good build to demonstrate one primary use of Lore of Fire, which is to burn things. And what do you burn? Well, trees for starters, obviously. So we've got a build here, build I've been kind of experimenting with a little bit lately. We've got some spearmen with shields up front, an Empire captain to support melee defense, units of hunters led by a huntsman general, very cheap, and also comes with some good fire synergy. He's got, of course, Hail of Fire. This oil flask isn't really great to use against single entities. It's tough to connect, but if you can, it can do some pretty hilarious damage. It applies 50% flame weakness, 48% speed negative, which is quite nice. And of course, with the Hail of Fire, you can combo that up quite well. He's also got Glittering Scales for -5 melee attack and AoE. Not great. You don't really want him in range to make this effective, but it's nice insurance in case he gets sniped. It can help roll the dice a little more in his favor. We've also got Knights of the Blazing Sun, of course, one of the units that has innate fire damage. A high charge bonus plus that fire damage means they'll do hilarious damage on the charge if Kindle Flame is active. Yeah. Got a couple of mortars here. Actually, one mortar, one cannon, and some just regular Empire Knights. And yeah, that's pretty much it. My opponent's gone all in for a full Vanguard here with Orion, 5 Wild Riders, 5 Dryads, and Spellsinger Lore of Life. So a pretty narrow build, but going to be right in with it. You can see the mortars already raining in fire there. Same with the cannons. We gonna pop a fireball to get that Kindle Flame going right off the bat, and I believe I do use the Hail of Fire immediately. So you can see these treemen momentarily, just missed it. That 47% weak to fire, now down to 25%. If I can use the oil flask as well to throw into a blob, like right here potentially, and get a nice burning head, it will do a lot of extra damage. You can see here these Wild Riders taking a pretty good beating from the Empire Knights. Empire Knights just kind of holding them back, but the Hunters doing a ton of damage. Orion, though, and the Wild Hunters of Kurnos getting up in the back line, doing quite a bit of damage to the Empire Knights as well. Maybe not a ton of bursts. That being said, the cannon's able to fire free as well. Mortar, I'm not really sure what it's shooting at, to be honest. I think they're shooting at the Spellsinger, which is fine. I'm much more focused on getting my Knights into the trees. These Knights of the Blazing Sun, this is the kind of engagement they were just absolutely made for. Flaming Sword of Ruin, really going to help them much, but will help these Spearmen absolutely. That magic fire damage, they'll be able to get some hits in on the Dryads, even if they don't really have good enough melee attack to take advantage, but it's more so just to proc the Kindle Flame here, so that our units can continue to do fire damage. You can see the Spellsinger getting absolutely blasted by the Great Cannon and another Fireball. Yes, so another Kindle Flame active. You can see these Dryads are going to take a charge with Kindle Flame active straight up from these Knights of the Blazing Sun here, and they just get destroyed here on this charge. And my opponent decides to admit defeat at that point. I mean, less than 2 minutes, I definitely understand. With an all-in Vanguard like that, you're either going to lose or win pretty quickly. And against a build with 6 units of Empire Heavy Cavalry, that's going to be tough, especially with Kindle Flame against your primary Vanguard infantry, which is Dryads. Knights of the Blazing Sun are a hard counter to Dryads, so yeah, pretty rough there. Huntsman General, been using him a little bit lately, but this is a multicast. Don't worry, we've got plenty of Lore of Fire coming up, so sit right there. We'll be right back with more. Another use for Lore of Fire is to burn mummies. But wait, you say, Black Dragons don't have fire damage, and you are correct, which is why we have a Supreme Sorceress, Lore of Fire up in the air here, double Black Dragon, 2 Bolt Throwers, 2 units of Witch Elves, 1 Sister of Slaughter for anti-infantry. You've also got 3 Dread Spears for some support, and that's pretty much it. My opponent's Tomb King's build here, he's got a Bone Giant, going to get some Incantation of Protection there to help mitigate some of that damage. A Cetra the Imperishable, a Necrotect, and a Necro Sphinx. Front line of some Skeleton Spears, couple Nehekara Warriors, more Skeleton Spears, and yeah, just a pretty wide build in general. Nehekara Horsemen as well. Pretty solid Tomb King's build. 2 Nehekara Horsemen. The Bone Giant is going to get outclassed by 2 Bolt Throwers here. It is RNG dependent. But keep in mind that bolt throwers, as far as artillery pieces go, basically the bigger the artillery piece itself is, the worse it's going to do in a counter-artillery engagement. And because bolt throwers, elven bolt throwers, are so tiny in terms of their profile, they are one of the hardest, if not the hardest, artillery piece to hit. Well, they are going to trade really well in a counter-artillery engagement with the Bone Giant, unless he gets just super, super lucky. But let's go ahead and talk about something real quick. So, Italian Spartacus recently released a video on breath attacks. You guys should definitely go check that out if you haven't. But I was helping out a little bit with the research for that, not a ton. I was kind of more just around while Falcon and Wicked were helping out. But one thing they discovered is missile damage buffs actually buff breath attacks, and flaming magic damage also applies to breath attacks. Not only breath attacks, but any bound magic missile. So what I'm doing here is, Cetra currently has Kindle Flame, and both of these black dragons currently have fire damage. You can see it says firing. This does count as a missile attack. Magic missile spells do not benefit from this, but any bound magic missiles, so like Moonbow, even Marcus's what is it called? His Amber Bow, stuff like that. Even like the Glady, for example, these missile damage buffs do apply. And keep in mind, Flaming Sword of Ruin does buff missile damage, and it also gives, of course, flaming and magic. So let's go ahead and check the effect here on Cetra. This first one doesn't do that great because I'm a little too far away. You really need to be super close to use single breaths on single entities, but that second one came in and did a ton of damage. So pretty decent stuff so far. Cetra can't really heal that damage back. And yeah, even if he had thrown up the Incantation of Protection, I mean, magic damage will circumvent that, right? So, breath attacks, as Italian mentioned, most breath attacks do not have magic damage. I believe almost all. I could be wrong. I don't remember. I watched the video a few days ago, and I don't remember 100%. I'll have to double check. But yeah, the Black Dragon's going to be very effective here. You can see one shot does come in. Did it actually finish off the Bolt Thrower? No. So you can see it comes in. It gets close enough to actually hit the elves themselves, but will not actually hit the Bolt Thrower very consistently, especially out towards the edge of its range. If you were to get the Bone Giant a little bit closer, like maybe come stand it right here-ish, you could probably hit it a little bit more consistently. But yeah, for the time being, my opponent knows what's up. He sees me circling back with the two dragons here, so he's going to try and dodge this with Cetra. And he does manage to dodge it relatively effectively. That first breath attack makes some okay contact, but the second one, not really so much. Yeah, and the second one, yeah, not even close, but the Bone Giant still is going down, so we're still trading pretty much at cost here. I mean, the two Bolt Throwers are 1,400, the Giant is 1,600, so pretty good at cost there so far. The Black Dragons still have a way to go to pay for themselves, obviously, but we do have one more breath attack each, and with Cascading Fire Cloak, of course, they can come in, do really good armor-piercing damage, that melee defense as well, massively helpful, and a Burning Head just to be able to clear out this chaff if we need to. But speaking of clearing out chaff, these Witch Elves and the Sisters of Slaughter here are my anti-infantry. Of course, the dragons can do anti-infantry as well, but in this specific build, I'm using them to counter constructs. So the Witch Elves and the Sisters of Slaughter will be the primary anti-infantry component. Witch Elves as well offer some utility, of course, with the Madness of Cain. You can lock some units down. You get them into an enraged situation, and especially like spellcasters, keep them from using their abilities. Yeah. My opponent's going to be forced to advance here. You can see we're going to be making our way forward as well. These Sisters of Slaughter just raring for some combat here. But Cetra also a little bit angry about being breathed on and having to smell these Black Dragons' terrible breath this entire time. Going to get in here. And, oh, that friendly fire, too. Ah, Dark Elves don't care. Yeah, she probably deserved it anyway. Cetra getting hit a couple times here, but these Witch Elves, you can see I was trying to go in to get Cetra into an enrage, but they're not quite fast enough. My opponent is able to pull away there, and the Necrosphinx as well, just kind of hanging back, understanding that they don't want to necessarily get pulled into a situation where they get double-teamed by these dragons. Need to try and keep these two together if he can, but here comes a nice Burning Head Overcast, going to come in, and although I was going to win this infantry fight regardless, I wanted to try and clean it up pretty quickly, because, of course, Undead, their leadership means that they won't necessarily rout, they just crumble, and even then, getting them to crumble is still pretty tough, but they do get low enough to disintegrate with that unit. Maybe. It doesn't look like they're actually disintegrating. They should be, but Not really sure there what's happening. Looks like maybe a little bit of a bug, but anyway. Cetra at this point is going to be the focus of the Reaper Bolt Thrower. Has used up most of its ammo here. It only has a few more shots left, 4 shots, but the other one looks like it has used up all of its ammo. So they have gotten pretty much all of their possible value at this point, which I'm pretty happy with. Nice Flaming Sword of Ruin here, and the last round of breath attacks. That one, a little bit of a swing and a miss, made some okay contact. And this next one, again, I'm a little bit far away to really be using these as effectively as I should be. To use a breath attack to its fullest extent against a single entity model, you want to be like right next to them if possible, like as close as possible to use the breath attack. Cetra does go down there to this Black Dragon. This other Black Dragon here now tanking out the Necrosphinx's damage. This thing is going to start to get double teamed, and things are going downhill south for my opponent. These Nehekar horsemen haven't really been able to get down and shut down bolt throwers in a timely manner. And yeah, the skeleton warriors are able to not really do well in this infantry fight, at least do some okay damage. I mean, Witch Elf's taking some damage here from skeleton warriors. Not the greatest trade in the world, but still more or less trading at cost and just cleaning up that infantry line. Shabdi summon comes into the late game to try and stabilize things here, but it's yeah, not going to quite be enough to finish things out. And this Supreme Sorceress just evil cackling up in the air here with her Arcane Conduit and her 2 pet dragons. So this is basically like Dark Elf Cersei, right? Like if Cersei was a Dark Elf and used fire magic and had 2 black dragons. But yeah, very fun build. I'm curious to try this as well. I have another game to show you guys where I try a similar build against Norsca with some minor variations, but the Black Dragons come in at this point just to finish off the Ushabti. Not really too worried about them, especially on the charge. These Black Dragons will do a ton of damage, and they have enough melee attack to, yeah, do that. Just suck the life out of these statues here. Or, guys, beat the life out of them, really. But, yeah. The Supreme Sorceress comes over here to try and clean up the Necrotech. He has anti-infantry, but of course she counts as large up on her steed here. She is still going to take some damage, though. Only 30 melee defense and 45 attack. People underestimate Necrotechs. Necrotechs, even on foot, are quite decent characters. They can definitely fight pretty well, especially against infantry. Like, just having one saturated in a unit of skeleton warriors makes them actually quite potent. In a lot of situations. But anyway, nice kills on the Supreme Sorceress from the Burning Head there, and you can see the Black Dragons. The breaths do give you experience because, again, they count as standard missile attacks. I'm 99% sure. Otherwise, I don't know how these Black Dragons got all that XP. They did manage to rank up quite a few times each, which of course gives them tons of extra stats. Reaper Bolt Throwers as well. Started with a couple chevrons, I believe maybe 1 or 2, but managed to rank up again. And yeah, for my opponent, a little bit rough there, just taking the breaths from Cetra. I mean, granted, most people wouldn't expect that Black Dragon breaths would do that much damage to Cetra, but because of that Kindle Flame and all the different stuff going on there, you can really get some extra damage. And you can also do this with Warriors of Chaos as well, with a Fire Sorcerer. I mean, granted, the Warriors of Chaos Dragon already does fire damage, and I'm not sure, I don't know, that one could do magic damage, I would need to double check, but regardless, you could at least give magic damage or Kindle Flame, even just with like a Fireball or a Cascading Fire Cloak or something, you can still give that Kindle Flame for that sweet breath attack. Granted, you can't take double Black Dragon, but also, of course, with the High Elves, we'll probably get a replay. I don't have one today, unfortunately, but you can do Techless, obviously. Net plus Breath is a classic combo. Just generally getting that Kindle Flame going with Techless and the breaths is quite good. You want to use Flaming Sword of Ruin to try and buff the missile damage too to get maximum value, you can, but it's not quite as valuable as on units that already have fire damage, which is Chaos Dragon and the High Elf Dragons as well. But anyway, let's get to the next replay without further ado. Anyway, back to Burning Elves. Most people don't think of Lizardmen as a fire faction, but they absolutely are a powerhouse fire faction with the addition of the Fire Slan in the most recent DLC. They now have access to Kindle Flame, which is great because they have tons of units which can benefit from it. Salamanders being one of the best. They're anti-large, exploding missiles doing a ton of damage to various types of units. You can use them against infantry, use them against large. You can even use them against armored units, although they won't do as good, but still, that Kindle Flame helps mitigate that somewhat. Got a couple of solar engines here, and yeah, they also do fire damage, of course. The Slann himself, Fireball, Cascading Firecloak, and Burning Head. And as for infantry, we've got a bunch of Skinks, a Legion of Chakwa, and the Cohort of Sotek to give us some elites, plus 3 Chameleon Skinks for counterfire. Umbral Tide are operating independently of the other Salamanders out on the opposite flank here. These other ones are hidden for the moment. Blade Riders with Hagbane Tip's going to come back and discover them, so I'm going to go ahead and pull back a little bit there. I'm not really too worried about Wood Elves shooting me through the forest. They don't do that much AP, so it's really not going to be too impactful, but the solar engines are going to be great here, especially against high value, low armor targets. Again, Wild Riders, stuff like that. Just the value you get from the damage there, and the magic damage, especially against physical resistance, is awesome. That being said, I am a little bit far forward with this solar engine here. I'm trying to shoot this Spell Singer, try and get some free damage there, but I'm going to be taking some free damage in return. I don't have any way of healing in this build, so I do need to be a little bit careful with those solar engines. Meanwhile, over on the far side here, my opponent charges into the Chameleon Skinks, which are totally bait, and then, oh yeah, those anti-large flaming missiles come in from the Salamanders, the Umbral Tide here, and just destroy those Glade Riders. 100% destroy them. Not quite 100%, but pretty much. We're going to use Shield the Old Ones to try and keep this solar engine online here. Charging into the front line with the Skinks. Skinks will trade reasonably well against Eternal Guard. Eternal Guard with shields will be a little bit better, but they're going to trade basically at cost, more or less. And you can see the Spell Singer also comes in here. We're going to pop a Burning Head. It probably is going to burn some of my own Skinks. Yes, it does. It's all part of the great plan, guys. Just deal with it. Also, roast out those Wild Hunters of Kurnoth pretty good. But going to lead to my units routing and a few units breaking through the front line for the Wood Elves. So we're going to need to use this fire line, quite literally firing line. And, oh man, those side shots, though, are too juicy. If you can get a side shot with the solar engine because of the way it works, we'll get a ton of kills. It's basically like a cannon. It is a cannon, more or less. You can see here the Salamander hunting packs just absolutely exploding those Eternal Guards who got too close. And yeah, those Glade Guard definitely getting punished super hard by those side shots. You can see they're shooting back here, trying to deal with the Chameleon Skinks, but the Chameleon Skinks do have missile resistance, so I'm honestly not too worried about them just sitting here and taking this fire. That does leave, again, the Umbral Tide here to fire in. They have this extra cool kind of green effect to their flames. Very, very fitting for the Wood Elves to get the green fire. Yeah, no trees in this build, unfortunately, so it didn't necessarily get any direct synergy, but I mean, just the basic synergy of having Kindle Flame and the fire units is good against factions, even if they aren't necessarily weak to fire. I mean, just having that consistent 25% damage boost all across the line on some high damage, missile units or various other units, that Kindle Flame's so strong in so many situations. When we're going to proc one more, throw a fireball out here at the not the Supreme Sorceress, that's the last game, the Spell Singer here. Swing and a miss, but again, we still get the proc of the Kindle Flame here, and whatever units are firing at the time will get some damage. I don't know if we necessarily need the extra damage against the Eternal Guard, but we do get a couple hits on the Glady here. Nope, she's just out of range there. Maybe for the Umbral Tide. The Glady is going to be my primary target at this point. I'm not too worried about the Glade Guard. We've been able to thin out their numbers enough that I'm not overly worried about them taking down my high-value units over on this side. You can see we're just blasting those Eternal Guard here, but the Glady comes in. He doesn't have Kindle Flame active at the moment. She is in a position where she could potentially get blasted. And you can see the Fireball unleashed right as she takes a couple of key hits from those Salamanders there, taking some really good damage, and just a few hits there did a ton of damage to that Glady because of that Kindle Flame there. Kindle Flame with Salamanders and Solar Engines especially, just super, super strong. Fire Leech Bolas are okay. They're not nearly as impactful, in my opinion. I would much rather just take Salamanders. I mean, they're all right, depending on the matchup especially, but against Wood Elves, they don't really have the range. They kind of get outclassed by Wood Elves' range. Salamanders actually have really decent range for a Lizardmen unit. 125, not nearly as good, obviously, Has 170 of something like a Glade Guard, but still, oh man, the Kindle Flame again, and the Glady just gets mass melted by the Solar Engines and the Umbral Tide here, and that's why we get the synergy. One more Kindle Flame, and that's the thing about the Slon, is with the Greater Arcane Conduit, you can get more Kindle Flames than anyone else, right? Because he's the only fire caster. I guess Teclis as well has Greater Arcane Conduit, but yeah, those two in particular you can get so many Kindle Flames with that it's quite good synergy. You don't even need to have Flaming Sword of Ruin to give your own units fire damage. Just take units with innate fire damage and just get that sweet damage boost. Throw fireballs, Burning Head, Cascading Fire Cloak as well. Super cheap way to proc that, and it's a decent spell also. Really great to use on any high value unit, Lord, anything that does good armor piercing damage. So yeah, fun stuff. Well played to my opponent there. This build in particular, I still need to think. I think I still need to tweak it up a little bit, but definitely quite decent here. I'd be curious to get your guys' thoughts. In general, I think this is pretty risky against the Wood Elves if they go with a mass like Way Watchers and stuff. I mean, granted, if you try and play forward from your Solar Engines, really use them to take out the Way Watchers, you can get some good value, but it's tricky because the Solar Engines are a little bit slow. If you mess up your positioning, you will end up getting sniped out pretty hard. But with the Fire Slon, throwing fireballs, of course, his own innate abilities as well, the Bound Banishment and the Aura of Pretzels and everything, very, very good stuff. Legion of Chakra did a great job fending off the Wild Hunters of Furnos and just generally being tanks. 91 kills on the Cohort of Sotek as well. They trade very, very nice with most units, in fact. I don't know, there's not a lot of units that the Cohort of Sotek trade badly into. I guess direct missile fire is probably the one thing that they aren't great against. Chameleon Skinks sort of doing their job of just tying things up, being annoying, providing that Overwatch fire and consistent poison across the board, draining my opponent's resources, and yeah, generally being a nuisance. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that one. Definitely a fun build for the Lizardmen. We've got a couple more to get through, so let's get to it. Two more uses for the Lore of Fire are to melt ice and to burn things that have regeneration. And what better faction to showcase that than Norsca? I'm up against good old Styx here. This time I definitely regret not bringing double Black Dragon because my opponent has two Frostworms which are both weak to fire damage, so I could have hard countered him potentially with that. But as for infantry, we've got one Witch Elf, one Sister of Slaughter here, 5 Spears, and Slaanesha's Harvesters plus 2 Dark Riders, and yeah, a couple Shades with dual weapons. As for Styx here, he's got some Skin Wolves, which of course have regeneration. Frostworms do not, but they are weak to fire baseline, as are a lot of the Frost type units. Wolfric is not weak to fire, but he's just on a chariot being Sirtha Ek. He's trying out his best Sirtha Ek impression today. You can see over here we get a quick charge in on these Icehorn Marauders. They are a pretty expensive ROR, not that expensive, so I don't want to overstay my welcome too much, but need to be careful. These Frostworms, not only do they have Frostbite, but they also have a Chilling Aura and magic attacks, so they'll be very good against the Slaanesha's Harvesters. Actually, kind of regretting bringing them at this point. I originally was going to bring this build without the Shades and the Slaanesha's Harvesters and with a second Black Dragon, but at the last minute I decided to change up the build and bring the Shades instead, and I'm definitely regretting things at this point, but here we're going to be able to get a really good engagement with this Black Dragon. The Frostworm does dive down, which is the right call here to bog these units up. You can see then the Skin Wolves charge in and the Marauder Chieftain charges in. Granted, with these Spears here, the Spears with the flaming damage will be able to get some good work in on the Skin Wolves. You can see very quickly they start losing combat. Likewise, the Black Dragon on the rear charge here with that fire damage did a ton of damage to that Frostworm. So the Shade's able to pull away there. We're going to keep them in a position to try and fire at this Frostworm here. Fireball here. Ooh. Does make contact and does pretty good damage against the Frostworm. Frostworm's 70 armor, pretty decent, but not amazing. But this Frostworm really wants my Shades for breakfast, so he's going to come in and try and get a breath, but just gets an attack by that Black Dragon. Meanwhile, over here on this side, the other Frostworm came in, got some really good terror and Frostbite, just slowing down all of these Cav here so they get eaten up by Marauders. But that Frostworm is routing. I'm going to go ahead and chase it with the Supreme Sorcerer, see if I can't get it off the field. And The Sisters of Seeing Doom here, actually the ROR Witch Elves providing some terror. You can see those plus the spears beat the Skinwolves here. These other Skinwolves that had taken a bunch of fire damage also not doing too great. They still have quite a few models left though. You can see my protection for the Shades is giving out a little bit. That being said, these are Shades with dual weapons, so although it's not ideal for them to be in combat, they do have, what, 58 melee attack with the anti-infantry from the dual hand weapons. So, yeah, had a little bit of extra points, figured why not spend it on the hand weapons. I'm not really that much of a fan of the Shade weapon variations. I think the basic ones are the most cost effective, but they are going to get into a position here to potentially get some value from that extra anti-infantry. You've got these Dark Riders coming back from route. This other Frostworm is very low as well, so I'm feeling pretty good at this point. We've got both the Frostworms just about off, but I thought this one, we were close enough to the edge of the map that I thought it would actually go away, but unfortunately this Supreme Sorceress did not do her duty in chasing that thing off and is actually going to be, chased down here herself with the Frostworm's Chilling Aura. He might be able to catch up and actually get some work in. Meanwhile, over here, just cleaning up what's left of the Norscan forces with my infantry here, trying to finish off these Marauders just so that they don't come back from route. I'm a little bit outnumbered at this point, but we're going to get another Flaming Sword of Ruin here. Try and buff up this Black Dragon, maybe use a good breath attack here. Let's see. Let's get in close and watch. See where I end up using that breath attack. A little bit late on that. I think the Kindle Flame is pretty much worn off by now. But yeah, actually didn't end up using it in time. Still did get some fire damage. Looks like it might have finished off a couple of Skinwolf models there, but really wasn't super impactful at the end of the day. Could have gotten a lot better value from it, I feel, but it's all good. Spirit Leech on the Supreme Sorceress here. Going to start to try and pull this game back a little bit here. The Frostworm still being on the field is a big key. We did chase the other one off here, but my Shades have also been dealt with. Did manage to get no extra kills at all. So, in fact, yeah, dual hand weapons really didn't end up being very helpful here at all. Fireball going to come in, blast one of those Skinwolf models, and actually will rout them. I could potentially chase them with the Supreme Sorceress, just kind of stay in the area, but there's a bunch of Marauders on the low ground here. The Shaman Sorcerer, Lore of Death. And yeah, these spears coming back from route. We do have the Black Dragon relatively healthy at this point still, so still feeling pretty good about my chances. We're going to come in and rear charge here, see if we can't terrify away these Skinwolves. Gives these poor Dread Spears some support. Definitely be asking for some favors later, but that Frost Breath comes in, does apply Frost Bite, so I'm not really able to chase these units very effectively. And Fate of Buna as well on the Sisters of Singing Doom. You can see the Marauders kind of regrouping, unbeknownst to me on the low ground, getting pulled together here and advancing up the hill. They're quite tired at this point, other than the Iceborn Marauders, of course. They have perfect vigor, so they're going to be just trucking it up the hill, but these other guys starting to get a little tired. And that consistent Spirit Leech as well is starting to be a little bit of a problem. You can see the balance of power has actually been pulled back as my Supreme Sorceress does take a big hit here from this Frostworm. I'm trying to get my Dragon in there, finish him off, but due to end up taking a big punch right to the face there, unfortunately. So this Shaman Sorcerer, yeah, he's doing good, getting some good kills. He's up to 98 so far. The Chariot, single model Chariots are just super hard to deal with for Norsca. They're very strong in general. Sisters of Singing Doom there actually get routed away by the Frostworm, so that's another source of terror for me offline. You can see Wolfric comes in, doesn't get the best charge, but he does set up an excellent boat here to try and finish off these Dread Spears. Beautiful play there from Styx, and he is slowly but surely clawing his way back in this game. You can see this Frostworm does get finished off here. Maybe? It's so low, 205 HP. Unfortunately, that Flaming Sword of Ruin was a little bit misplaced. I should have probably had it here to finish off these Skinwolves, but regardless, Sisters of Singing, not the Sisters of Singing Doom, rather the Sisters of Slaughter, do have good melee defense, but unfortunately their leadership just can't quite hold up to this assault. These Skinwolves do end up getting terrified as well, so super close here in the late game. The actual Sisters of Singing Doom come back from route. And the Frostworm as well, not too happy, should be able to chase him off, but likewise Wolfric and the Shaman Sorcerer chasing off some of my own units here, but the Black Dragon still being so healthy is a big issue. He can potentially take a lot of these damage from these Skinwolves if they try and countercharge in on him. I think I make a little bit of a mistake here in trying to go after these Marauders. I really should have tried to go up in the air, come back around and charge down directly onto the Skinwolves, because basically, Air Units 101. I know we've kind of talked about this a little bit before with the Vampire replay, but with air units, on the flip side of that, you don't want to get countercharged, right? If the goal when you're on the ground is to countercharge air units when they come down, your goal in the air is to directly charge the units that would be countercharging you if you get a good engagement. Now, that comes with some caveats there. Knowing what's a good engagement or not can be very difficult, obviously. But basically, if you can get like a one-on-one isolation, or even better, if you get like with support, direct charging into a group of monstrous infantry, for example, with an elite flying unit, typically is pretty decent. These Sisters of Slaughter do have, again, pretty good melee defense. Not quite enough to hold up, though, against this kind of a situation. The Icehorn Marauders, especially with their extra melee attack, the Skin Wolves with the charge bonus, are able to come in here, rout those Sisters of Slaughter. I'm going to come over and try and get some damage on Wulfric. He takes a couple big hits from the Black Dragon here, so very, very close in this late game. We've got this Shaman Sorcerer coming back, though, and I just don't have enough numbers at this point to clean up a lot of these routing units. I'm really kicking myself for throwing away those Dark Riders so aggressively earlier, but we still have a chance here, certainly. If we can finish off those Skin Wolves and then finish off Wulfric, we should be able to come back and win this. Those Skin Wolves are all super low as well, low on models, which means they won't be able to regenerate much. These ones immediately get terrified here, and this is what I'm talking about. You want to directly charge units that are going to be charging you, because then you get the advantage of your charge bonus from the air, and they don't get their charge bonus. And I decided to instead countercharge Wulfric here because he has a pretty good charge bonus. I do go ahead and throw the Flaming Sword of Ruin as well, but getting punched in the back here by these Skin Wolves is pretty painful. You can see this Black Dragon started to take some damage, and despite the fact there's only a handful of models here, he's still going to take quite a bit, even from Wulfric himself. I mean, 488 attack, and he does have armor-piercing weapon strength as well, so he can do some good damage against that Black Dragon. Thankfully, finally, some of those Skin Wolves start to actually shatter. But Styx makes a great move here and actually pulls this Shaman Sorcerer through the Marauders there. I don't want to get hung up on the ground here. Well, maybe I do. This is actually, again, a bit of a mistake by me, but I want to try and take advantage of the charge bonus and finish off Wulfric here, but I end up actually getting hit a few times here on the Supreme Sorceress by the Shaman Sorcerer and by some other units there, so I need to be careful, because if I lose her, my Black Dragon is definitely going to want to rout. So we'll see. We do have some spears coming back here. It's very, very pitched in this late game. And yeah, that Spirit Leech as well. This Supreme Sorceress suddenly getting low on HP is really, really bad. The Shaman Sorcerer does get terrified, but not quickly enough for my liking. And a boat here, makes pretty good contact there with those Dread Spears. Probably going to be enough to rout them off at this point. And the Black Dragon's fighting. It's up to, what, 63 melee defense? So I honestly should probably just leave it in this sustained combat at this point. With that high of melee defense, these guys aren't going to be able to get that consistent of hits against it. But it is taking quite a bit of damage from Wulfric at the same time. Wulfric's getting consistent hits, and the fact that it's surrounded here, units that are on the rear or side won't necessarily be subject to the melee defense because of the way the positioning mechanics work. I'm relying on the terror at this point to really win me the game. But unfortunately, the Black Dragon just taking hits, despite the melee defense, the extra melee defense and everything, just taking consecutive hits. And here, I make a pretty big mistake, dive in again while Wulfric has Hunter of Champions online. And this is going to lead to the Supreme Sorceress getting absolutely canned here. I do throw one last Cascading Fire Cloak to try and keep the dragon fighting up to 90 melee defense at this point, but unfortunately with my leader routing there, it also routs, and Styx is going to take that one. Very, very close at the end of the day. I definitely made a couple of mistakes, but very well played to Styx. Some excellent placement there on Wulfric's boats, and also excellent work with Wulfric on the chariot as well. Double Frostworm, pretty risky against Dark Elves, but if they don't end up bringing the right counter units, you can get some excellent value against stuff like, Witch Elves, Sisters of Slaughter, the Doomfire Warlocks as well. Frostworms are a direct counter too, so very well played to Styx, and yeah, from my perspective, I did forget to bring Burning Head, I think, or did I? I don't think I had it there. Would have been nice to have in some certain situations. It's not that great against Skin Wolves, but yeah, I definitely wish I would have brought the second Black Dragon instead, like I originally planned on. Because these Slaanesha's Harvesters, I mean, the Shades did okay. They definitely did some okay work, but I feel like having that secondary Black Dragon would have just been so much more helpful. But anyway, got one more replay to get to, so let's get to it. Rounding things off, we've got Gaston and the Empire. Here in the desert, we're going to be taking on the Skaven, who although they have the Hell Pit, who does have regeneration, weak to fire damage, don't have a ton of like direct fire synergy. That being said, Skaven do have a couple things. One is low leadership, so shock damage really pays off well against them. Obviously, having extra shock damage from fire will help quite a bit. So we've got 2 Knights of the Blazing Sun here, 2 Empire Knights, supported by a Warrior Priest, who's got a key item, Banner of Eternal Flame, to give AoE fire damage to both units, and of course the other buffs as well, just for good measure. 2 Huntsmen. We've got the Sunmaker here, which is currently raining down rocket fire. Let's just enjoy cinematics for a moment. My opponent's army here as we take a look. We've got some Plague Monks here, some Jezzails as well. Lots of chaff in support, as to be expected. Oh man, it's brutal though. You can see the Warp Lightning in the distance, very well placed by my opponent, actually just wrecks the Sunmaker crew there. So I probably honestly don't have too much longer. Thankfully, the Sunmaker does use up its ammo pretty quickly, so I'm going to be able to generate most of the value I need right off the bat. Already up to 59 kills, and my opponent did bring quite a bit of quote-unquote expensive infantry here. Some Sensor Bears even out to this flank. Council Guard as well, and yeah, some Rat Ogres and stuff. So at this point, feeling pretty good. Got good old Bright Wizard here to give us some Kindle Flames, but that oh man, that Warp Lightning just absolutely brutal against the Sunmaker. That being said, you can see how I have this Huntsman General in a position here. I was giving the Great Cannon extra fire damage, and with the Kindle Flame, it got a few key hits on Ikit. You can see Ikit's already very low. I mean, regardless, the cannons are just going to continue to apply continuous pressure. The Jezzail's not quite in a position to start sniping back yet. They are going after the Huntsman General first rather than the cannon, which is understandable, certainly. His anti-large damage will do pretty good. You can see we got a quick charge on the Tail Slashers there. They actually have fire resistance, so 70% fire resistance, so that wasn't the best target to charge with the Knights of Blazing Sun, but I'm going to pull up and around, try and go after some other targets here. You can see Plague Monks are making their way up into the backline, and good old Gaston is getting sniped pretty hard by those Jezzails, just 360 no-scoping in return. Actually point-blanking just a bunch of Plague Monks there, but yeah, this guy's getting hard counter-sniped, which is fine. Knights of the Blazing Sun are going to come in here, get a good charge. You can see with that burning head in the distance there, roasting out a bunch of rats in the front line. We were able to get a nice Kindle Flame charge there, just absolutely wreck some of these high-value units, especially the Sensor Bears. Now, Sensor Bears do magic damage, and Knights of the Blazing Sun have magic resistance, so they're actually going to be okay in this kind of an engagement. I still don't want to leave them there too long. 90 unit models with 44 weapon strength is the main benefit of Sensor Bears. They do a ton of damage if you get them in the right situation. But yeah, the magic damage will work against them there. And Empire Knights with the Warrior Priest here, of course, you can see they all have fire damage. They're just cleaning up this line. They're kind of like a discount Knights of the Blazing Sun. I mean, not really discount, because you have to pay for the Warrior Priest, but going to unify them at this point. Sunmaker crew long gone, but the Hammers of Sigmar charging in here, lancing down the foul rats, and this is the way to end a replay like this. With the Premier Fire faction, we didn't talk about Warriors of Chaos also have some good fire synergy. They don't actually have that many units with fire damage. It's only the Chaos Dragon and the Swords of Chaos. For some reason, Archaon doesn't have fire damage. I don't know why. But regardless, they still can bring, you know, Flaming Sword of Ruin and get good value on their infantry or on like Shaggoths and stuff, and certainly with the Dragon you can get excellent value with the Kindle Flame and just using the breath attacks alone. As for other fire synergy factions, let's see. Norsca has access to Lore of Fire, but they don't have any units which have innate fire damage. Well played to my opponent, by the way. Burn the whole house down. Kind of a fitting name for this replay, but anyway, 201 kills on the Bright Wizard at the end of the day from those burning heads. And yeah, 108 at the for the Sunmaker. Ended up getting taken out, but still got some great value off the bat. Knights cleaning up units, and the Great Cannon as well. Very key in helping to rout Ikit off. And the Huntsmen also got some good work in shooting Rat Ogres, you know, shooting various other units. They even shot the Plague Monks a little bit. You know, they could shoot pretty much whatever they need to. A Warrior Priest for Banner of Eternal Flame, supporting the Empire Knights. Great stuff. And yeah, that's why the Empire, I say, is the premier fire faction, because they have the most units with innate fire damage, and they also are the only ones with the Oil Flask, which is the only other way to get additional weakness to fire other than Kindle Flame. Granted, it's very tricky to use. It's much better to use this on a big blob of units and then cast like a flaming burning head on it rather than try and use it on a single entity and then snipe them with like a Luminarch. But I mean, the Luminarch does fire damage. No, you've got your Knights of the Blazing Sun. You can give whatever units you want to fire damage with the Banner of Eternal Flame. And keep in mind, this applies to both melee and missile attacks. Again, breaths included. Granted, Empire doesn't have any breaths, but if you're in an allied situation, keep that in mind. And also, of course, this Hail of Fire, although it does give reload skill, it will also imbue fire damage in melee as well. So in a pinch, you can use it if you need to. It's definitely better to use it on missile units, absolutely. But let's see, what else? Yeah, Knights of the Blazing Sun. The fact that this guy's got Banner of Eternal Flame and the Huntsman General is a big part of that. Luminarch, obviously. Yeah, pretty good stuff. Other fire factions, just to quickly round things out here. Lizardmen we talked about. Did speak about Dark Elves as well. Skaven are weak to fire because of their low leadership. Vampire Coast has some units with regeneration. And of course, ethereal units. Flaming Sword of Ruin, just that magic fire damage specifically. Now keep in mind, magic and fire damage are separate effects. So units with only the fire logo, the little logo right here, they don't do magic damage. They will be subject to physical resistance. They need to have this little magic symbol in order to indicate magic damage. But anyway, yeah, Vampire Coast, somewhat weak to fire damage. Fireball also very good at counter-sniping artillery, so good against them in general. Tomb Kings, of course, weak to fire in terms of their lords only. Empire, the premier fire faction. Dwarfs, they don't have a way to get Kindle Flame, but they actually do have some fire synergy. If you have a look here, not this guy. Yeah, Perfect Vigor is actually not too bad. Here, for the Thane, we've got this item here, which gives plus 22% weakness to flame in a constant AoE. So it's not quite as, it's basically, yeah, like an AoE Kindle Flame. Granted, it's not map-wide, but they do have some units which deal fire damage. Blasting charges themselves deal fire damage, the charges themselves. The miners don't do fire damage in melee, but the Dragonback Slayers also have another effect that gives flammable. Minus 36% speed and weakness to fire, so you can actually stack this with Kindle Flame in a 2v2 situation. If you're with, for example, if you take an Empire Dwarf fire synergy build, you can give this flame resistance, or sorry, flame resistance is for themselves, but that you can give this extra weakness to fire to your opponents. Obviously, Iron Drakes do fire damage, Flame Cannons obviously as well. Brimstone Guns also do fire damage, so you can get some good synergy potentially there. Let's see, Felix for the Empire and for the Dwarves both. If you take Karagul, he can have temporary fire damage on himself, plus a bunch of melee attack and anti-infantry. Pretty much deletes Morgr faster than anyone I've ever seen before, so that's kind of hilarious. Against the Beastmen, Morgr is not a super common pick against Dwarves. Kazarak's more common there, I would say. But against, like, the Empire, taking Felix with Karagul is often a good idea against Beastmen. Let's see here. Who else? Fire damage. I don't think there's too many other units. Of course, in a 2v2 situation with an Empire player especially, you can get fire damage on whatever units you need to. But other factions, Greenskins aren't necessarily directly weak to fire on too many units. They do have Trolls, which have regen. But again, the low leadership can make it very effective against them. Vampire counts, absolutely weak to fire damage, have a ton of regenerating units. Norsca has both regenerating and frosty units, which makes them countered by fire. They also do have Lore of Fire, as I mentioned, but they don't have too many effects. They have a handful of effects which have fire innately. The Marauder Chieftain actually has an interesting niche in that he has constant fire damage if his leadership is above 50%. If you take this Flaming Axe of Cormac, which has to be one of my favorite item names in the game, holy cow, it's so cool. Yeah, so if you take that, he will have fire damage if his leadership is above 50%. So you can get some good fire synergy with either a Balefiend Lore of Fire or a Shaman Sorcerer. You actually have the choice with Lore of Fire, the only lore, you have the choice between the two. And I believe there's one additional fire effect from the War Shrine. You have a look here, this Giver of Glory gives 26 melee attack, 16 leadership, and fire damage on an ally for 29 seconds. So a pretty powerful melee attack and fire buff, so you can potentially use this to dish dish out some additional fire damage as well. So you're going to be taking a fire build with, if you want to take a fire synergy build, at least with Norsca. I don't know that it's necessarily competitive, but you certainly can with the War Shrine and with a Shaman Sorcerer or a Bale Fiend, either one. And the Marauder Chieftain also. He's not quite as good as Wulfric, but, I mean, he's got something. He also has this Potion of Foolhardiness. If you want to be able to guarantee that fire damage at some point, if he's low leadership, you can pop this Potion of Foolhardiness to make him unbreakable, and then he'll make sure that fire damage stays active. And he'll continue to fight as well, which is, the most important thing. But playing as Norsca as well, keep in mind, Frost Worms are weak to fire damage. Norscan Ice Trolls are one of the few units that have more than 25% weakness to fire baseline. They actually have 45% weakness to fire baseline because of their frosty status plus regeneration makes them very weak. Throg, thankfully, does not have that. He only has the regeneration weakness to fire. So he's not quite in the same boat, but still low armor and regeneration on him makes him a weak target to that, as are Skin Wolves. Just in general, between the frost and the regen, pretty much always bring fire against Norsca, I would say, if you can. Bretonnia doesn't have access to it. It's not really weak to it. Flaming Sword of Ruin can be good against Bretonnia if you need the magic to get damage in on Grail tier units, but there's generally better ways of doing that for most factions. Beastman, Morgr is weak to fire damage, but he has fire resistance as a compromise, so keep that in mind. Other than that, they don't have Lore of Fire. Butchers of Kalkengard also have regen, another high-value, important unit that's weak to fire, so it can be a good idea to bring at least a couple key units, like I said, Helix, like 1 or 2 units of Knights of the Blazing Sun, just something to be able to give you some fire burst damage against either the Butchers and Morgr. Yeah. Let's see, Warriors of Chaos, as I mentioned, they have a bit of fire synergy with the Chaos Dragon. Fire damage here, and if you want to know about breath attacks, I mean, obviously, go check out Italian's video, as I mentioned. I'll have it linked below. And also, be sure to check the tooltip. It will tell you if it does fire, if it does magic, and generally what it's useful against. Sometimes it's not wildly accurate, but generally breath attacks, if you're close enough, will do good against single entities. There are some exceptions, like the Hydra and the the Sun Dragon. But actually, yeah, for Dark Elves, I didn't bring a Hydra in the replay, but the Chill of Sontar is an exception, obviously, because it has Frost Breath. But if you take a War Hydra, you can see this also does fire damage as well. So you can get good synergy if you don't necessarily want to take Flaming Sword of Ruin to give your dragons fire damage. You can get good synergy as well from the Hydra. Not quite as decent because, again, not as good against single entity models, but still very, very decent. So hopefully you enjoyed this fire multicast. All of your burning questions have been answered. Thank you for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed. Yeah, if you like this sort of content, be sure to like and subscribe. Hit that bell notification button. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.